Yeah, I hear you. And I think we're online now. And welcome to our daily Get Together reading club. My name is Patrick Brigger, and I'm your host today. And I'm very happy to welcome Michael Bungay Stanier. Hi, Michael.
Nice
And
to see you,
his
Pat. How
newest
you
book,
doing?
yeah, thanks. And your newest book, Michael, The Advice Trap, just came out, and it's the much anticipated follow up to the coaching habit. And we
Yeah,
are very delighted to have you today. So thank you very much for coming. So I would say let's get started. And
sure.
Mike,
Let's plunge on in.
I would like to ask you a question because we're talking about giving advice. What was the worst advice you have ever received yourself?
Uh, like everybody here, I've received a ton of bad advice in my life. The good news is most of it I haven't followed. And that's true with all of us. We're constantly getting advice that's not that useful, not that helpful, doesn't solve the real problem. But for most of us,
Mhm.
it just kind of flows off us and we don't actually pursue it. And while that's good for us because it preserves our sanity and it allows us to not make too many mistakes, you have to realize that you're often on the other side of that and you're often the person giving the bad advice. So, I tend to, Pat, frame myself and I go, look, if I've taken somebody's advice and it doesn't work, that's not their problem. That's my problem. I've made the choice. I'm an agent here. I get to kind of make my own choices, take my best guess at what's going on. And I also have the mentality of, look, if I do something, I've decided it's worth doing. And if it works out, that's fantastic. And if it doesn't work out, mostly that's fantastic because I learned something and I'm like, okay, don't do that again. I mean, it's well known that every entrepreneur has a closet full of failure for the one or two trophies that they can point to. So I don't tend to weigh it up as I've taken bad advice and I'm bitter about that person. I do, and this is the key message of the book, keep thinking to myself, you know what? Advice is a little bit overrated. If I can just slow down the rush to give advice, you become a more effective manager and leader.
Mhm. And usually, people who everybody wants to give advice. So it's always well meant, I would assume.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you in the
Yeah. So
book that
everybody does want to give
you wrote, the
advice.
advice.
And Pat, I'm sorry. We got just that bit of delay and it means we're talking over each other.
Uh, not a problem, please.
So you said everybody wants to give advice and it's well meant, and that's absolutely right. And there's reasons for that. One of the reasons is we've all spent our lifetime being rewarded for the person who has the right answer. It starts in
Mm,
school and then high school and then university and then your early career. You're like, do I know this stuff? Do I know it? Do I know it? I got to know it. But
mhm,
it just turns out that at a certain point, you knowing the answer or thinking you know the answer or thinking you have the best idea or solution advice stops being a very effective leadership tool. Now, there are moments, lots of moments, where advice is exactly the right thing you want to be delivering. I mean, in some ways, that's what getAbstract helps you with, which is like, let us condense books so that when you think about advice, you've got good models and good clarity about what you offer up to the world. What I'm trying to do
mm,
is slow down people's rush to leaping in and having advice as their default setting. They're like, somebody starts talking, you start thinking, what do I need to tell them? And I want you to shift to going from what do I need to tell them to what question can I ask them?
Okay. So in your book, you want to shut down, like you say, that advice monster and people to become more coaches. And
Yes.
and you have some ideas, some factors, some tools you give the people how they can and move into that more coaching habit. What are
Yeah.
those?
Yeah, well, so it started with the success of the Coaching Habit book, which getAbstract was really great at promoting, and it was one of getAbstract's top downloads for a number of years, which was so cool to see.
It was.
And in the getAbstract, in the Coaching
Mhm.
Habit book, it says, look, 7 good questions take you a long way down the path to being a more effective manager, leader, individual contributor, and honestly, human being. It's like, this isn't just if you're at work.
Mhm.
It's like if you interact with other human beings, knowing these 7 questions can make all the difference. And the other part of that coaching habit book was, let me teach you how to build a habit, because insight that doesn't lead to action is a bit of a waste of time. I want people to be behaving differently as a result of having read the book. So in the end, this commitment to being more coach-like, which is how I define it, I say, can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? That is the generic cure for the advice monster. But for many of us, we need to do a little bit more work to tame our advice monster, because we all know that advice monster. Somebody starts talking and your advice monster comes up out of the dark and goes, I'm going to add some value to this conversation. Here I go. And that's what we're looking to tame, that kind of reflexive action to leap in and give advice.
I mean, do you, by the way, see differences between the genders? I think men are more known. They always want to find the solution and, hey, here's the problem, let's fix it. And maybe women are more receptive of listening first. You see difference there?
I don't have research that backs that up, and I'd be unwilling to kind of plunge into it on a purely anecdotal level. But what I have seen just across, hundreds of companies, tens of thousands of people, many different countries, is the advice monster is something that plagues men and women. We all have it because we've all been acculturated to go, it's good to have the answer. And it might be true that some women are a little better at listening. But I do think that we all suffer from the advice monster syndrome.
At the end of the day, yeah. And if I look at that's just maybe you have better numbers that back this up, but I would guess if you ask managers or people about their coaching abilities, the majority will probably say they're better than average. Could that be right?
Exactly.
So why it's that bias?
That is
how
right.
How can we fix it? Yeah. How can we become better coaches?
Yeah. It's a little bit like asking people how well they drive. 93% of people think they're above average, which is, of course, statistically impossible. And honestly, I think if you go into many organizations and go, hey, coaching matters, are you any good as a coach? Most people will say, yeah, I'm pretty good. And I think that comes from 2 things. One is not always understanding what we mean by coaching, because for lots of people, and this isn't their fault, but they think of coaching as it's just another word for managing people. I just tell people what to do. I just do it in a kind of coachy way. It's the same thing. What I found but it's not, because Daniel Goleman back in the year 2000 wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review called Leadership That Gets Results. And in it, he says, look, there are actually 6 different styles of leadership. What he found, and this was research that was multi-country, thousands of managers, different industries. He said, great leaders have the ability to know which of the 6 leadership styles to use in which context, and they do that. They understand that every style has its kind of costs and advantages, it kind of pros and cons. But they also understand that there are times where you need to be directive. There are times where it's helpful to be democratic. And there are times, there's another one, which is helpful to be coach-like. And what he found in his research was, he said, look, coaching is a leadership style that is least utilized. And it also is shown to have direct correlation to improved profitability, improved employee engagement, and improved culture. So for me, I'm like, how do we make coaching less weird? How do we make it feel like it's something that most people can do? And to your question, it's about starting with helping people realize that you're probably not doing a great job of it right now. And what I found is, when we work with people in our training at Box of Crayons, whether it's virtual or in the classroom, actually starting to practice And you know, as a training piece, we'll say, okay, Pat, we're going to have you coach Michael for 3 minutes, only 3 minutes. But here's the rules. I'm going to give you the 3 questions you're allowed to ask. I'm going to give you the order in which you ask them. You're not allowed to say anything else. And here's what happens in those 3 minutes. They go deeper and further than they ever thought possible in just 3 minutes. The conversation changes. So what you start off as this is the problem we're trying to solve, it shifts and it changes and it evolves just in 3 minutes. And thirdly, it almost kills people not to leap in and give advice for 3 whole minutes. If you're on the other side of the conversation, you're like, you know what? I can't remember anybody listening to me for 3 whole minutes without being interrupted. It's an extraordinary experience. So really, in some ways, Pat, the challenge is to have people start noticing their advice monster, start noticing how quickly they leap to want to jump in and try and fix things. And I'll just say this, if people are interested in going, I'd like to find out more about my advice monster, if you go to theadvicetrap.com, there's actually a place you can take a quick survey to find out which of the 3 advice monsters is strongest in you. Is it tell it, is it save it, or is it control it?
Advicetrap.com. Okay, I'll be sure to check that out, because I'm really curious to see which trap or traps probably I fall into. So in your coaching sessions, your goal is to teach people to become better coaches. Your goal is not to coach somebody. You want the people to learn how to fish so they can catch their own fish afterwards.
That's right. You know, I started when I started Box of Crayons. One of the things I did was I coached people. So I built a coaching practice, and I quite like doing that. But at a certain point, I went, you know what? Of all the things I can do in this world, coaching people is not the best use of what I've got. Because I'm an okay coach. I'm pretty good most of the time. But I look at some people and I go, you're a really good coach. You know, I really admire you as a coach. And I went, and you know what? I like writing books. And as you know, probably better than anybody, there are some good books out there in the world. There are some pretty terrible books out there in the world. There's a lot of bad business books. I think that's one of the great gifts that getAbstract offers the world, is you don't have to read this terribly written business book. You can just extract the value in 8 good pages from getAbstract. But part of what I was like is like, you know what? I reckon I can write a good book. And with the Coaching Habit and the Advice Trap, I think you got 2 good, short, lean, useful books to help people shift their behavior.
And I suppose when you want to coach, though, you also need to have, you cannot just coach anything. You need to have some type of background information about what you want to coach. You need to be the master. Or is a question, do you always need to be the master in the topic? Or is it already the listening part and trying to figure out what's the problem for the other person? Is that?
That's right. So counterintuitively, it can be helpful for you to not be a subject matter expert in the topic. So let's say, for instance, Pat, I was coaching you. And the first question you might ask is, so Michael, what subject matter expertise do you have around knowledge summary, about online learning and training, around distribution of content and of IP? And I'd be like, a little bit, but not much. And you might go, Michael, do you think you have more or less subject matter expertise than I do? And I'm like, I have about 3% of the subject matter expertise that you have, Pat. And what I do know is probably hopelessly out of date. So I'm hopeless as a subject matter expert for you. But could I be a useful coach for you? Well, I reckon I probably could, because what I do understand is some human dynamics. What I do understand are some common challenges that we face as leaders and as visionaries. What I do understand is some of the concepts around scalability and impact. And what I do understand is the power of me holding the space for you to figure out some of this stuff yourself. Because part of the job of a coach is to truly create thinking time and thinking space. Because honestly, if you had a technical question, you'd be like, you know what, I can ask my VP of something or other and they'll have an answer. I can call up some of my colleagues and friends that I've met in my world who go, hey, you know, we're in different but similar fields. I've got this dilemma, you know, it's the evolution of the subscription model. Talk to me about how you're seeing subscription. And you're far better to go to those people for specifics. But if I go, look, Pat, weekly call or every 2 weeks, I go, Pat, what's on your mind today? And you're like, you know, I've got this thing about this person on my team. And I go, great. So what's the real challenge here for you in all of this, Pat? And you're like, oh, okay, for me, and now we're into a conversation that is less about subject matter expertise and it's more about me holding the space, helping you think, and also showing up with a fierce love to want you to succeed. You know, love in that my job is to have you be at your very best. Fierce in the I will push you and provoke you and challenge you in a way that others may not, because you may not get that from another person.
So at the end, you are empowering and maybe setting free additional energy that the person was looking for. Also, I read in your book, you say very often the first part of the conversation or the first sentence is not what matters most. You don't have to listen, you have to wait and listen later. So never listen to the beginning, just there.
You can listen to it. You just don't be seduced into thinking that that's the real thing. Because when I have a conversation with you and I go, hey, Pat, what's on your mind? And you go, blah, blah, blah. One reaction I have is to go, oh, okay, well, actually, I know something about that. Or you should go and talk to this person, or you should go read this book. And, you know, the odds are that I'm now busy trying to solve the wrong problem, because the first challenge that somebody comes to you with is almost never the real challenge. It's just their first articulation, it's their first guess, it's a stab in the dark. And what I would more likely do is I go, okay, if that's on your mind, tell me what the real challenge is here. And then I'd go, great, what else is a challenge around this? And what else is a challenge around this? And what else, and what's the real challenge around here? And I bet you in 3 or 4 minutes, we just have a conversation that deepens and focuses and just gets a little more robust about what the real thing is that you're wrestling with. And now I'm like, now we're here, now we're somewhere juicy. Let's get into trying to figure out how this gets sorted out.
And that's when it gets interesting. And I think the coachee person at that point appreciates and really sees the value of the coach. What do you do as a coach? What do you do as a coachee, as a person being coached or seeking to be coached, and you realize that my coach is not doing a good job? Because I follow your book, I read your books, and I learned the guy's not, the person is not coaching me well.
Well, let me turn the question on you, Pat. You're being coached by somebody, and you're like, this isn't going well. I've talked to Michael. I've seen the gold standard of coaching, and this is not what I'm looking for. If that was happening to you, what would you do? How would you handle that?
Well, I would certainly recommend your book and your books, all of them, starting with the Coaching Habit and the newest one, obviously. I think it's probably difficult if that person is your boss, your superior. Then it becomes a little bit more difficult. Maybe I'll move him a little bit more in my desk so they can see it or something like this. But probably you have to give feedback at the end of the day. You have to give direct feedback in a nice way to say, look, I'm sorry, that didn't help me. I appreciate your efforts. Maybe something like that.
Yeah. So I'll say a couple of things. The first is, to the people watching and listening, I hope you noticed what just happened there. This is a classic coaching move that I just pulled out from this. Patrick went, how do I do this? Which, of course, gets my advice monster going, because he's actually asking a question that I have an opinion about and I know stuff about. And I could leap in and answer that question, but if you replay the tape, you'll see what I did. Where I went, that's a great question, Pat. I've got some ideas, but tell me, how would you handle that? And Pat would say, oh, okay. And then he did the work. He's like, it's hard. And I give them my book, but then I move my desk. Oh, but actually it comes down to me giving them feedback. And I'm like, exactly. That's what it comes down to, giving them feedback. So there's a couple of things to share specifically, and these are shared in both of the books. The first is the power of the question number 4, the foundation question, which is, what do I want? It's very hard for you to give feedback until you're clear on what you want, because until you know what you want, you don't know whether you're getting it or not. So part of what's helpful is if you're being coached, either formally by a coach or informally by, a boss or a colleague, it's like, what are you looking for in that relationship? Because until you're clear on that, it's hard to know whether they're giving it to you or not. Then the 7th question, the final question in the book, the learning question, is really helpful, particularly at the end of any conversation, really, where you ask, and this is the question, what was most useful or most valuable here for you? What was most useful or most valuable here for you? And if you add that question to the end of almost any conversation, what you're doing is you're saying, we're pausing now for a moment of reflection and learning and extraction of the value. So if your boss at the end of every conversation said, hey, Pat, what was most useful or valuable for you in this conversation? And you're like, honestly, not much. This didn't really work for me. Then there's this opportunity for that conversation to go, here's what I'd like to be different next time. If they've asked that question and 3 times in a row, you've gone, not a whole lot, then hopefully they're getting the message that they need to do things differently. In which case you go, we should buy copies of Michael's book, not just for you, but for everybody in this organization.
Okay. Michael, we're also getting questions through the comments, so you people can go. I don't know what they are, so I'm just going to pick one. I haven't read them.
Okay, great.
As Sarah is asking, so I'm just reading, no idea what it is. If you have a manager who is not great at coaching your team, how can you step up and coach your team without stepping on any toes? It's a little bit similar to what we just discussed, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I can give a very quick answer. Let me give a very quick answer to that, because you read it out, and it's difficult. I think the first thing you always ask yourself if you've got a bad manager is this a fight worth fighting? Because some bad managers, you're like, I want to try and work with them to get a better relationship because I like them, even though they're not doing a great job at managing me. There are some people where you're like, there's no point in me trying to make this person a better manager because we just don't have the relationship, or I don't have the commitment to try and make that work. Just know that you're making that decision not to invest in that relationship. And then there may be ways of trying to do that informally, which is like, okay, you don't want to step on the manager's toes, but maybe there's a way where you pull people aside and go, let's have a coach-like conversation. We don't even have to call it coaching. I'm just going to lead with a little bit more curiosity and see if I can be helpful.
And then we have another question. We sort of answered that one too, but I want to read it anyway. I've been waiting forever to ask a trusted coach this question from Dieter. How can I distinguish a good coach from a bad coach in 2 minutes? The market has exploded, obscured, and the good ones are becoming increasingly rare, I fear. Yeah,
well, I would agree that there's very little barrier to entry in the coaching world. Effectively, if you can say the phrase, I am a coach, then you become a coach. So there's no certification or training or anything specific that you have to have. There's no quality control. So there's a lot of, I would say, mediocre coaches out there for sure. So all you can do is kick the tires and try it out and then take your best guess. I mean, honestly, I've had a long time coach for about 15 years. And I had to kiss a lot of frogs on the way to find Ernest. I mean, I got referrals from people. I did little tests with them. One of the things, Dieter, I found is helpful is to know what you're like as a client. Because here's what I can say. I go to a coach, I go, look, here's what you need to know about me. I know a lot about coaching. I'm not that impressed by you taking me through a process that's really obvious. I'm slippery. I will try and make you like me as a way of distracting you from actually doing hard work. And I need you to not fall for my self-deprecating charm. I need you to hold my feet to the fire. And you have to get really clear on, this is the type of person I am. Tell me if you can handle somebody like me. But then it's a question of kissing frogs and kicking tires until you find somebody where you're like, this feels like a fit.
Thank you. So we're running towards the end of the webinar, and I'd like to ask you a personal question that mirrors the first one. So what's the best advice that you have ever received, and from whom maybe?
I think it was to do this webinar with you, Pat. I tell you a piece of advice that has been really helpful for me is, because advice comes in different disguises, right? Sometimes it's not even advice. It's just somebody's comment that strikes you at the time and you're like, that was really important. So when I was 14, a teacher of mine at high school said, Michael, what do you want to do when you finish high school? And I hadn't even thought of it. I hadn't even realized that you finish high school and you need to have a plan. I was like, okay, I don't know. And I kind of blurted out, I'd like to go study at Oxford University, because my dad is English and actually went to Oxford University, and I admire my dad. So I was like, I'd like to go to Oxford University. And he went, oh, well, you'll need to be a Rhodes Scholar to do that. And he planted that seed. I became a Rhodes Scholar that won me a scholarship to go study at Oxford University. Now, was that advice? It was kind of advice. It was more like a thrown out just opinion. And it really landed with me. But how many thousands of other comments have I had like that, which just have landed on stony ground and it hasn't stuck? So I'd say that's probably the piece of advice that has made the biggest difference in my life, because I went to Oxford and I met my wife and I didn't go back to Australia and I started a whole career. It was one of those moments where I came to a crossroads and I went left instead of right.
Wow, interesting. So thank you so much for your time, Michael. And for me, I have to say that half an hour gave me, first of all, somehow a new push and power that I'd like to be coached. I can see there's so many things that I could learn and improve myself, and also the desire to follow your advice and just listen and maybe be helpful more to others from stuff that you learn. Sure. So in one word, I think this half an hour really empowered me on different levels. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. That. Yeah, my pleasure. It's lovely to see you again and lovely to talk to you. And thanks to everybody who's tuned in to watch this with us.
Yeah. And so please, we'd like to remind you at getAbstract, we want to find the relevant knowledge so that you all can take better decisions for yourself, for your company. And books from Michael, he has written several of them, many of them, the latest one that just came out this year, 2020, so it's brand new. I can really recommend it to all of you. We provide our library right now in this pandemic crisis for free, so to help you make better decisions, to organize virtual offices, to become better coaches as well. So feel free to tap into that source. Be safe, practice social distancing, and we have tomorrow at the same time another get-together session. Michael, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I was very happy to be able to talk to you, and I wish you a good week and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Extraordinary challenges require extraordinary responses from thought leaders, company executives, and employees. As the coronavirus pandemic unfolds and businesses scramble to adapt to escalating containment efforts, getAbstract is here to help organizations navigate this crisis wisely and professionally. For over 20 years, we've been committed to providing relevant knowledge from reliable sources to help people make better decisions in their personal and professional lives. In line with our mission to empower decision makers with relevant knowledge from trusted sources, we are proud to offer businesses free access to our full library until May 18. Embark on a no-strings-attached knowledge journey with getAbstract. Sign up today.